totally wrong not to allow public comment. Regular citizens should be able to say words. We were able to in January, we were able to in November, but now you're telling us that we can't provide actual verbal public comment. I think that's outrageous. I think there's violations of the Open Public Meetings Act where you have to allow citizens to be able to talk. And when did this change occur? Did you guys take a vote on whether or not this was going to happen? Was this a change in your charter? If there was a change in your charter, then it would end up having to be something that you would have to vote on. You would have to put it on the agenda. So this is not proper. This is a governmental agency happening in a governmental office, and the citizens have a right to be able to speak at it. It is not correct for you to prevent people from doing public comment. In your charter, you said in November you welcome both written and verbal comments. In your January charter, you said you welcomed written and verbal comments. But only in the March charter did you say that you were not going to allow the public to be able to verbally address you. You didn't take a vote on that. You just suddenly changed the rules without any kind of public vote, without any kind of public notice, and that is not correct. You putting me on mute is not going to change the fact that there is a citizen here who attended a public meeting and wishes to be able to make a public comment over the fact that you're not allowing the verbal comments of regular citizens. You made it hard in November, you made it hard in January, but at least you accepted the verbal comments of citizens. This meeting, however, you just got through saying you unilaterally changed the rules. You didn't take a vote. Do the members even know about it? You have 27 members. Do they even know that you ended up changing the rules? Under the Open Public Meetings Act, you can't make changes to a fundamental document like your charter and not be able to have the citizens be able to weigh in on it, to be able to actually talk it through. And so I am very peacefully having a political protest here saying that it is totally inappropriate for you to forget that the citizens have a right to not just write down what they said, but also for them to be able to publicly address the group. So the fact that you're squelching someone who dissents from what you're doing is absolutely a perfect metaphor for the way this organization has worked from the beginning. You don't want to hear from people who disagree with you. In the last meeting, there were 7 citizens who weighed in, and they were highly critical of this organization. Because of that, you guys changed the rules to make sure that from now on, citizens aren't able to do that. You didn't even read the written comments that were provided. You did that in January, but you didn't do it in this meeting either. So how is the public that is on TVW now going to be able to weigh in on what's actually happening in this meeting? I think it is totally inappropriate, a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act, and it is not correct for you to not allow citizens to be able to provide a verbal public comment. All I'm trying to do is simply say what the citizens find outrageous about this organization is you don't allow dissenting voices. You have 27 people, all who agree with one another on what they want to do, but instead of listening to what the citizens have to say, you now squelch and cut off and prevent citizens from being able to actually address the actual task force. This is a governmental document. This is a governmental entity. You are a government. A government can't be making fundamental changes to its charter without giving the citizens notice on it and for the citizens to be able to have a public comment on it. By doing it unilaterally, without any kind of vote, without any kind of notice, makes this completely inappropriate for you to be having a meeting where the citizens are not able to provide public comment. Even the written comments are not going to be publicly displayed. You're not even going to have some person that's at least going to be able to read what it is that the citizens had to say. You're not even giving them that opportunity. And that is absolutely a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. The law is very clear. You're not allowed. It is illegal for you to proceed and change fundamental documents for an organization and not allow the citizens a chance to be able to weigh in on it. You have to give them public notice. You have to give them a chance to be able to actually testify and tell you, we don't think it's a good move for you to take away the people's right to be able to address the organization. You allowed it in November. You allowed it in January. And because citizens said negative things to you, where you interrupted people constantly, not allowing people to be able to talk, instead of that, your lesson from that is don't let them talk at all. What is that saying about this organization, that you're not able to allow citizens to be able to provide verbal public comment? Why is it that it was welcome back in January, where it said the Domestic Extremism and Mass Violence Task Force welcomes both written and verbal comments? You said it also in November. The task force welcomes verbal and written comments. Now you fundamentally have a new charter that nobody voted on, that you now say, no, we're not going to allow public comment anymore. We tried. Regular citizens went forward, contacted your organization, and said, how do we provide verbal comment? And there was no response. I tried every which way I could to peacefully be able to participate in this like I have a right to do, but instead you're taking away that right, not allowing me, not allowing regular citizens that are doing it on Zoom, they're listening in. Why is it? Is it something about the fact that TVW for the first time is going to record this? You don't want the citizens of the state of Washington, the ones that can't come down to Seattle at 9 o'clock on a weekday, to be able to actually see what happened at the meeting. You don't want to hear the fact that lots of citizens think it's outrageous that you are doing this committee, you're doing this task force, and you're not allowing the citizens to be able to talk at it. You're not allowing the citizens to be able to express their opposition to the organization. You even were making it where citizens couldn't, even during the verbal comment period, to be able to criticize the entire organization. Why can't they? At every city council meeting, at every county council meeting, in the legislature, they allow citizens, both pro and con, to be able to testify, but not here. What is it about this governmental entity that's somehow different than all the public disclosure laws, all the public reporting laws, like every other governmental entity? How is it you can change your charter? How is it you're able to change the fundamental document of your organization and not have some kind of vote on it, some kind of public notice on it? I do not believe that this is legal for what it is you're doing. You're not allowing citizens to be able to speak.
They're not hearing you, so
I think that is an absolutely perfect metaphor. They are not hearing me. Even when we did actually provide verbal comments, both in the November meeting and the January meeting, they weren't listening either. The only difference this time is we're not allowed to even speak in the first place. This young lady is a perfect metaphor for how this organization works. We're not listening to you, sir. We don't care what you have to say. I think it's very important for the citizens in a public building, for a citizen to be able to express their complete opposition to an organization that is violating their own charter, violating the state law on the Open Public Meetings Act. It is totally appropriate for a citizen who helped pay for this building to be able to express themselves, which is exactly what I'm doing. You're getting paid the same whether I speak or not, so I don't know what your problem is. The reality is, however, that if you want this to be shouted down while I'm actually speaking is absolutely the problem. You read the written comments at the January meeting. You read the written comments in the November meeting, but in this meeting where you said you were going to announce received public comment, they did not do that. They didn't read what the citizens had to say. They weren't willing to actually even read the fact that people submitted written testimony. So as far as the public knows, they have no idea what the citizens have to say about this organization. Instead, written public comments are distributed to all the members, but they're not distributed to the public. When you look at the meetings, minutes of every single meeting, the first meeting in November, you actually listed the individual people who actually testified. In the January minutes, you didn't name them. All you said was the quantity of people that provided verbal comment and written comment. Now, you're not even saying how many people provided written comment. You're not reading what people said in their written comment. And because you guys are saying, well, we're not hearing you, it is no different in this meeting as it was in the January meeting and the November meeting. But at least in those two instances, citizens could address the organization, the members, and yes, they didn't like hearing citizens saying something negative about them. You're now a governmental entity, and the citizens have a right to be able to criticize a governmental entity, especially in this case, where they're violating the Open Public Meetings Act, where they changed their charter without citizens having an opportunity to be able to weigh in on it. Nothing on the agenda for March says that you guys are going to change the rules and not allow citizens to be able to provide verbal comment anymore. You only say, well, we're only going to allow written testimony. Okay, but when I asked to be able to do that, no response. This organization is set up to immunize itself from any criticism, immunize itself from any dissenting voices. All 27 members all agree. The problem is one side of the political equation is a threat. The people on the left are not a threat. All we're trying to do is do what citizens are allowed to do in every city council meeting, every county council meeting, in the legislature, is to be able to have time to be able to provide verbal comments to their representatives. Here you have 27 people who are going to be deciding the outcome of this thing, and they're not hearing us. As the young lady just got through saying, the group doesn't hear you. The citizens in November said things that clearly they didn't listen to. In January, they said and expressed their opposition to the organization, saying that there are fascist tendencies where they're trying to squelch dissenting voices. And your response to that is to prove it true by making sure that there are no verbal comments at the March meeting and presumably all future meetings. But did you give any notice to the citizens that you were about to do this? Did you actually give the citizens a chance to be able to weigh in and be able to testify on it? I simply am highlighting the fact that this entity, this governmental entity, is not interested in listening to the citizens at all, and you proved it by simply saying, no, we're not going to allow people to verbally address us, and we're going to make sure that on TVW there is nobody that's ever going to challenge anything that these people say. That is unlike any other governmental entity in the state. Even Sound Transit, the most insulated governmental entity there is, allows the opportunity for citizens to be able to weigh in and to be able to provide public comment during public comment period. I now look at the March agenda, and there is no public comment period at all. What it simply says is, we are going to announce received public comment. But unlike in November and in January, you didn't read what people had to say. I simply fundamentally believe that this entity is illustrating perfectly how much they are uninterested in hearing a dissenting voice. They aren't allowed to have 27 members. They can't have one on there that is on the other side of the political equation, not even one. 27 of them all making decisions that affect every citizen in the state of Washington, yet not one of them is allowed to actually hear from regular citizens anymore. You listen to them, they talk to you in November, they talk to you in January, but you probably didn't listen to them then either. But at least the citizens had a chance to be able to talk, to be able to convey their frustration with this organization. But here, you're not even allowing that. You're not even reading what the written comments are. And the fact that they just continue to go on with their agenda without any dissenting voices is once again a perfect metaphor for how this organization works, how this governmental entity works. And it is so uncomfortable for a couple of people that are paid to be here, are so incredibly uncomfortable that a citizen decided to sit down and politely point out the fact that this governmental entity is not following the law, not following their charter, and fundamentally changing the charter of their organization without any notice to the public and no opportunity for the citizens to weigh in on. So I find this maddening. I don't think citizens think this is fair. I don't think they think it's right. And it is extremely frustrating for a regular citizen who drove over here and probably paid $20 for parking to be able to just sit here and be able to only hear them, but for them to not hear us. That is extremely frustrating to me. There was another young lady in here that was simply expressing her views on this entire thing, and yet she was only told, oh, well, why don't you provide written comment? Sorry, you had to do that by 5 o'clock yesterday. No other governmental entity does that. Every other governmental entity allows people to sign up to be able to provide public comment just before the meeting starts.
Sir,
Not this organization.
I just want to make sure where you can continue to provide public comment for a week following this meeting.
Fantastic. Isn't it great for the next week we can provide written comment that no one's ever going to see, that the citizens aren't going to be able to have an opportunity to be able to listen to or see.
Will be distributed to all.
It is completely ridiculous that, yay, the 27 members of the meeting get to hear what the public has to say, but the public does not have a chance to be able to see it. Once again, we have to do a public records request on a governmental entity to find out what the citizens had to say. In every other governmental entity, people could actually watch the actual hearing and be able to hear what the citizens had to say. But unlike the legislature, where it actually puts at the bottom of its report, in its minutes, it actually says the arguments being made pro, the arguments being made con. Not this organization. The most you ever did was in November, you simply listed the names of the people that managed to testify. You never named anything that they ended up saying. Back in the January minutes, you didn't even name the people. All you said was how many provided verbal comment, how many provided written comment. You wouldn't even identify the people that were actually saying it. You didn't even let them be able to have their words actually conveyed. If you provided written comment, you guys actually at least read it. In this particular meeting, in March, you're not even reading the written comments publicly. It's because TVW is recording this. TVW only does recordings of governmental entities. This is a governmental entity, yet it's not acting like one. You're not doing anything that any other local government or state government does, and that is refusing to be able to allow regular citizens to be able to get a minute and a half, 2 minutes, some amount of time where they can verbally convey how they feel about it. On TVW, you can watch any public hearing down in the legislature, and you get to hear the citizens saying pro and con things about the bill. Not this governmental entity. I simply don't understand how TVW with a straight face can record a meeting that is clearly violating what every other governmental entity has to do, and that's to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. And under the Open Public Meetings Act, you're not allowed to make fundamental changes such as laws, such as statutes, such as ordinances, without giving notice to the citizens, to allow the citizens to be able to weigh in on it, for the citizens to be able to be notified in advance. Imagine what the reaction would have been if you guys had put out a opportunity for the citizens to know that at the March meeting, you're not going to allow public comment anymore. We're going to listen to the citizens on whether or not this is a good idea or not. You didn't do that. You didn't allow regular citizens the opportunity to be able to do that. You didn't give them any notice whatsoever that the citizens have every right to be able to weigh in on such a fundamental change of your organization. Instead, I heard Jamie simply say, we changed it. Do the 27 members even know that it was changed? Did they take a vote? If they did, then they ended up taking a vote where the citizens didn't have a chance to be able to see it. What if the staff did it, but didn't tell the 27 people and they did it unilaterally? You have staff members unilaterally changing the charter? You guys can do that? At the state level, in order to do a constitutional amendment, you have to absolutely have a 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate, and you allow the people to be able to vote on it. In this case, you have a staffer fundamentally taking one thing, changing the fundamental document of your organization and simply saying you're not going to allow the citizens to be able to actually be able to publicly comment anymore on what's happening at the meeting. I don't believe that that is possibly can be legal. How is that not a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act? How can you possibly go forward with a change in your charter, in your own constitution, in your own founding document, and in November you say, we welcome verbal and written comments. In January, in your charter, you say you welcome verbal and written comments. But because at the January meeting, you had people verbally criticize this organization and the members of it, all because of that criticism, you've now changed your charter. But I can't say you, because it sounds like the 27 members didn't take a vote on it. It was some staffer and the Attorney General's office saying, we're changing the charter. I cannot imagine any other governmental entity being able to unilaterally, by staff, changing the fundamental document of a governmental entity. How is it even possible for you guys with a straight face be able to say that this is a governmental entity that is subject to the Open Public Meetings Act, and yet here you are making sure that no regular citizen is heard by the 27 people who are going to end up making decisions that are going to affect every other citizen in the state of Washington. This is so wrong what you're doing. You're refusing to make sure that the citizens, not just me, I'm talking about regular citizens stepping forward and being able to testify and be able to bring forward rightful, legitimate criticisms of this organization and the direction that they're going. And here you are changing the charter of your organization, not by a vote of the 27 unelected members of this task force. Instead, I'm told, based on what I just heard, that the staff simply changed the charter of the organization. Once again, back in November, you said you welcome both written and verbal public comments. That was in the agenda, and it was also in your Constitution, in your charter. In January, in your agenda, you said in January, we welcome both written and verbal comments. You said it in both the charter and also in the agenda that the citizens, you welcomed their written and verbal public comments. You clearly don't welcome it now, because you learned in November and January that there's a lot of citizens who have verbal comments that you disagree with, that you don't like being criticized. You don't like citizens pointing out all the members by name. What's wrong with that? Citizens should have every right to be able to call out by name the people that are on this task force and say they are all in the same camp. Why can't we say out of 27 people, You couldn't find one to add on there that would be on the other side of the political equation, pointing out all the extremism that happens on the other side. No, you had to have 27 people all agreeing and saying the same thing, all pulling the same boat, all rowing in the same direction, no dissenting voices. But at least in November and December, you allowed citizens to be able to express themselves verbally.
60 seconds.
Not here. You couldn't even give 60 seconds for citizens to be able to do so. I have talked for 25 minutes, and yet throughout that 25 minutes, I was just told not one of these 27 people heard a word I said. They didn't listen to a word I said because the staff of the Attorney General's office made sure that they did not hear any dissenting voices. They unilaterally made a decision that we're going to change the charter and we're not going to allow citizens to be able to verbally address the 27 people that are all rowing in the same direction for us to point out we don't like the direction you're rowing. We think that maybe you should have a little balance in your organization. Why don't you simply allow regular citizens to at least be able to come in here, spend $20 for parking, and be able to actually be able to address you? Why not on Zoom? Even during COVID, you had citizens being able to weigh in at city council meetings, county council meetings, and the legislature and provide criticism and highlighting the flaws in various bills. In this case, with your charter, your constitution, no notice, no opportunity for the citizens to be able to weigh in on it. No, we're simply told the staff has changed the constitution of this governmental body, and we've decided we're not going to allow citizens to be able to talk anymore. Why couldn't you at least have these 27 people that clearly don't want to listen to us? Why not at least have them vote that we're going to stop people from providing verbal testimony anymore? You let them off the hook. You wanted to be able to protect them and make sure that they didn't hear from anybody that would dare disagree with them. So then that way they walk away from this meeting saying to themselves, you know what? Everybody agrees with us. We're all on the same side and the people are with us. That's what you've done by preventing citizens from being able to weigh in, and supposedly someday these guys might read what some people ended up submitting and writing. Why is it both in November and January you actually read what people wrote in their written testimony, but this time at the March meeting, at the one that's being aired on TVW, you did not read the written comments that regular citizens ended up providing? Why is that? Because TVW, for interested citizens, provides an unvarnished opportunity for the government to be able to talk and for the citizens to be able to talk. Why is it this governmental entity, the only one in the state of Washington, that does not allow a public comment period where the citizens can verbally be able to talk? For the governmental representatives that are making decisions that affect all of us, why is it that you're not allowing them, you're insulating them from any opportunity to be able to hear any dissenting voices, and you're making sure that TVW and the citizenry of the state of Washington have no idea that there are citizens out there that disagree with what these 27 people are saying right here today? Instead, we're only being talked to. We're not allowed to talk back. I was at a council meeting in Bellingham once during COVID, and they said, we're not going to allow public testimony because it might put us in danger. I asked this simple, reasonable question, well, why is it you talking to us is somehow not dangerous, but us talking back to you is dangerous? What was dangerous was I and many other local citizens in Bellingham wanted to be able to speak about what they were about to do, which was infringe on Second Amendment rights. Instead of even listening to us, they shut down the meeting, they all left, and they all went into executive session and made their decisions anyway. What does that tell you about open government? What does the Open Public Meetings Act have to do with anything that's happening here? You say in your charter you're subject to the Open Public Meetings Act, yet here you are not following it. You're not abiding by the law. You're not allowing citizens to be able to have 60 seconds, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, some amount of time for them to be able to actually say something to the people who are going to make decisions that are going to affect everybody in the state of Washington. I simply don't understand how in a public building where you're having a governmental meeting, where a government is stepping forward and making decisions and listening to presentations from other people, why is it you can't hear from regular citizens who simply want to be able to step forward and say something that dissents from the people that are saying the things in the formal testimony? They get 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes to be able to give their presentations. And yet, once in a while, we get 60 seconds or 2 minutes. Well, I'll take 60 seconds or 2 minutes any day of the week compared to what's happening here, where they're telling me, the AG people here are saying no one on that board, all 27 people, aren't hearing a word I'm saying. Doesn't matter that it was me. Could have been any citizen that wanted to step forward and provided a dissenting voice. They all learned when they saw your agenda, when they tried to sign up to be able to provide verbal testimony, they're told, no, you can't do that. And you look at the charter for this organization, and it was changed from January to March to the point where now it's different. You're not going to allow verbal testimony. Now I find out during the beginning of this thing, Jamie, one of the AG people, said, we, the staff, have changed the rules, changed the charter, and made sure that there's no verbal comment anymore. What governmental entity allows their staff to unilaterally change their constitution or their charter? This is beyond wrong that you're doing this. You're doing a governmental action right now. You're all subject to the same laws as every city council, every county council, the legislature, in Congress, on the national level. They all have rules that say citizens should be able to address the people that are actually representing them, that are making decisions. But also, citizens are allowed to listen to other citizens that are testifying on this legislation. It's not all about these 27 people hearing from the public. It's about the public knowing that there are citizens out there that disagree with what these 27 people are doing. And all I'm doing on behalf of a whole lot of people are highlighting the fact that the agenda of this organization, as a perfect metaphor for the fact that they're not listening to a regular citizen express his extreme discomfort and opposition to what they're doing, they shut them down. Make sure that they don't hear from them. Make sure that regular citizens don't hear from them. All I'm trying to do is simply highlight not just hypocrisy, just a governmental entity that isn't following the laws that every other governmental entity has to follow. And that just makes everything that this organization is doing, this task force, is illegitimate. It is not correct when 27 of them all make their recommendations at the end for them to have never given the citizens the opportunity to be able to actually express verbally to them their opposition to it. It made them uncomfortable in January how many people were criticizing them. And instead of accepting that criticism and simply saying, you know what, that's what happens when I'm a member of a governmental body. Sometimes I'm going to be criticized. Instead of just simply accepting the fact that some people don't like what you're doing, you take away their right to even talk to you in the first place. I'd much rather speak and be ignored than to not be able to speak at all. That is what is happening right here, right now. You're not even allowing the citizens to be able to express their views to you directly, and you ignore them. That would be far superior to what you're doing here. Is we're not going to let you talk at all. We're not going to let you say a word. We're not going to allow you to be able to make your case that what these 27 individuals that are all handpicked by the Attorney General, all of them agree with the agenda that they're going forward with. And as far as the public is concerned, for the first time tuning in on TVW, for the first task force meeting that they can see on TVW, as far as they know, these 27 people, everybody agrees with them. Everybody's on their side. We have no idea what ended up actually being submitted as far as written testimony. Regular citizens are never going to know what these citizens ended up saying. And instead, they're going to have to sift through some website somewhere, do a public records request in order to be able to find out maybe what some of the people ended up writing. Why would you force a senior citizen who maybe isn't comfortable with a computer have to sift through websites in order to find out what citizens felt about this organization? Why shouldn't they be able to just simply tune into TVW and be able to watch and be able to hear citizens for probably 8 minutes tops be able to express their opposition to what ends up happening? You're not even willing to give the peasants a couple of crumbs off the table. Instead, you're taking it away at all and saying, no, we're not going to allow citizens to talk to us. We're not going to allow citizens to know that they talk to us. And under no circumstances are we going to allow the public to know that the things that we're doing, there's a lot of people that disagree with it. I have complete contempt for this organization and the way you handle things, and there is simply no way you should be allowing staff to change the charter of your entire entity on a whim simply because you didn't like the fact that at the January meeting, people provided verbal comment and you didn't like it, and they were criticized, and they were interrupted, and they weren't allowed to actually finish their remarks. Instead, they were put their foot down on them, squelched their right to be able to say things, and that's not what public comment is. Public comment is about citizens having a chance to be able to express themselves, and you're not even allowing that. I have contempt for this organization, and it's simply outrageous that taxpayer money is paying for all this building, this organization, this governmental entity, this Attorney General's office, these 27 people, the people that are being paid in order to be able to give these presentations. Taxpayers are paying for all that, and yet you're making sure that the taxpayers have no opportunity to be able to actually verbally address the 27 people that all agree with one another that we disagree with what they're doing. You make me sick.